It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's community conversation. I'm going to immediately ask our Chief Executive Officer, Scott Chadwick, if he would provide welcome and opening comments. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Scott Chadwick.
Perfect. Is this thing, can everyone hear me? Perfect. Hi, I'm Scott Chadwick. I'm the City of San Diego's Chief Operating Officer, and welcome. This is our second go-round for these community forums designed to basically solicit your input into assisting us to hire our next police chief. Now, one of the things under Charter Section 57, Charter Section 57 of the City Charter gives the authority to the mayor to select the police chief. Well, obviously, the mayor, in doing so alone, it's a missed opportunity, meaning that here we have so many incredible San Diegans that can end up providing input into what the process not only can look like, but ultimately we want to land on selecting America's finest police chief for America's finest police force. So that's why we've established, again, the second of 6 of these forums. But that's not just the only effort that we're going to be making to solicit input. Thankfully, we've now got our website that's up and running. So it's on sandiego.gov, and it speaks to what the entire process is, where every bit of information that we have, we're putting out there for your benefit. We want to make sure that you know what the process is. We want to make sure that you know the information that we're providing to our council members. And then also, I'm sure what everyone wonders is, okay, this is a community forum. Well, what are you going to do with the information? Like, if you're soliciting my input, what are you actually going to do? So we do plan on synthesizing all of this information. We're going to put it together in a report. It'll be given to the recruiter who we had a competitive process to hire a recruiter, someone who's experienced in hiring police chiefs, and that individual has been selected. There is a 10-day appeal period for which then once the appeal period is concluded, then we can make the announcement on who it is, and we can move forward in trying to hire our next police chief. But again, getting back to your information truly matters to us. I want you to be as candid and honest and open in the dialogue that we have. We've got some wonderful questions that we have a fantastic facilitator that's going to be running this tonight. And again, we just want to hear from you. So please, let me transition over to Danelle Scarborough, and she's going to talk about next steps. Danelle?
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Everything that's on these 3 boards you have on a sheet of paper in front of you. I would invite you to, if you can't read these, let's look at the papers that you have at your table. The first thing that we're going to look at is the agenda, so you have a sense of how we will spend our time together. What we'll focus on is the heart of the matter, participant input. We have questions that we'll be answering, and we'll do so by first starting with a conversation at your table. So you see that there's a participant input sheet that has these questions. We're going to ask you to think about what your answer might be, jot your notes down. That's both for you having a time to think about what's important to you. And then also, if you would please, we would love to gather those input forms at the end of the evening and be able to add to the information that we've talked about in this open forum. After you make your own personal notes, then we'll take a few minutes and at the tables, share what your priorities are with your table mates. And as you listen to each other, you'll begin to hear whether there are things that you have in common or dramatically different. And we'll ask you to make a list of what's important to your table. So we'll give you we're gonna roll up our sleeves and get out the paper and markers. We're going to ask you to make a list at your table. What are the top 3 answers to the questions that we're posing you? And then we're going to ask you to draw straws, and whoever gets the shortest straw will be the person who comes to the front of the room and shares what your priorities are with everybody else so we can hear. So it's either something that people are really going to want to do or really not going to want to do, but we'd ask each table because we want to hear from you. The questions that we're going to focus on: what are the top priorities our next police chief must address? So we're looking at issues, concerns, priorities, what's important to you. Second question: what are the top characteristics or qualities? What kinds of leadership qualities must our next police chief possess? The third question, it is important that we capture your input on the form. What we found is we might not have the report out time that's necessary, but we do want to make sure your answers are written and gathered. That third question is there anything else? If there's something that you came to share that wasn't captured by the first two questions, is there anything else that the city of San Diego should consider when hiring its next police chief? So primarily, the first two questions, we're going to do the community conversation and report out. And then if we have time, the third question, but definitely on the input forms. We are going to, most of the time when you go to a workshop, a community session, there are guidelines, ground rules. We are using the guidelines from a local firm that has national reputation, the National Conflict Resolution Center. They have offered our community a code of civil discourse that we're using to, as our guidelines for our community conversation. You'll find those on the back of your agenda. I'm going to walk through them, but these are really hard for you to read, so they're not on the back of your agenda. Okay, so you have to try to squint and see these. So I'll read them carefully. Number one, we will promote an inclusive environment where diverse perspectives are shared and considered. The beauty of a community coming together is the diverse perspectives, and we're committed to that inclusive environment. We'll listen attentively and ask questions to understand each other's opinions. Not meant to be a debate, but to understand what your fellow residents and community members think about an issue, and so eliciting their understanding by asking good questions. Show respect for ideas and views, even if you disagree. We'll explain our positions fairly by presenting the reasons for them. And finally, we'll avoid personal attacks or other tactics that distract from our attention on the central issues. And the central issues being top priorities for next police chief and characteristics and qualities that that person must possess. We're probably 10 minutes in this first round, first question. I would ask you to start with some of your own personal thinking, make your notes on question number one. When it looks like the people at your table are ready to start the conversation, if one of you would be so brave as to jump in and open the conversation up. And I will give you a warning along the way, and remember at the synthesis at your table, you're looking at the top three answers to the question that you will write on a chart and bring to the front of the room and share with the rest of us. Ready, go. If you trust your scribe, they can keep writing while we ask the first group to come up, and we'll take a volunteer table. Do we have you're standing, come on up. We've changed the front of the room so you can see it easier, and so we're going to ask you to come here.
So I'm not quite sure.
All right, if we can, let's make sure you're turned on.
I think you did.
Okay, very good.
So you can hear me? Yes, I can hear the echo-ish thing. All right, so we're table 1. We're going to call ourselves table 1. We had actually a lot of great ideas, and I had like a list of 10 or 12 things that we thought should be the priorities, but we stuck to the rules, and we tried to take some of them and condense them into one. So one of the big things is focus on recruiting more officers. Number one, we feel that there needs to be more staff, more policemen. When we're staffing, we need to be looking at diversity and make sure that the new hires and the existing people reflect their community that they're in. So that's number one. Number two is community policing, and that's more about relationships with your community and understanding who the community is that you're serving, working closely with them, being responsive to them, making sure that they feel comfortable. And the third thing is training. Want to look at, make sure they have good training on de-escalation processes, addressing the racial profiling issues that we know we have, and then again, community sensitivity.
Wow, very concise. Bravo. Great role modeling. Table, ready? We're going to move these to the front of the room and keep focusing our attention here.
I don't want our proximity to this table to make you guys think we stole our ideas from them. Okay, for question one, we voiced it a little bit differently. We looked at recruitment, retention, enhanced morale, and then training. Okay, the chief manages the department, and those are fundamentals to the human resources that he has, and the training actually feeds down to achieve some of these things. They have to be trained in terms of how to recognize and respond to the issues. So number one would recruitment and retention, enhanced morale, and training is how we bunch those. Secondly, creation of trust and legitimacy with the community policing for all the reasons that you guys said. And that means recognizing and relating to the diverse population, the homeless, mental ill, racial and ethnic makeup, and a negative, something to avoid is racial profiling. So we cluster that there. And then the third one, we started to move into specific, almost like policy things. So it's kind of a grab bag of maybe examples of things that we thought about. But, excuse me, okay, it means recognizing marginalized communities, the mental ill, homeless, racial profiling. We wanted to also raise up the issue of the school-to-prison pipeline, where we criminalize behavior of kids in schools. And this has not so much to do, it has to do with the school district's police force and the school district's policies, but as we've seen in Cherokee Point and other places, without the active engagement of the police department with the schools, that won't happen. So.
I'm glad you said you didn't listen in, because it did sound quite similar. Yeah, very good. Okay, which group would like to go next? Would you? Very good. Come on up.
Hello. So ours was the cool table. We've got 2 Navy veterans at our table, so thank you for the service, gentlemen. And, so here's what we came up with for our top priorities. First is a recognition that in San Diego we have a fairly large homeless community that has special challenges, special needs from our police. So we want a police chief who can be sensitive to those types of needs. Very important that the chief be able to lead a force that can communicate across our diverse communities across San Diego, different ethnicities, different economic structures, different values. Of course, enforce the laws. And the last point is that they should be able to focus on protecting the unempowered through our city. And this is a very tough thing to do sometimes in terms of reaching out to those who need their help the most. Is sometimes a place where the officers find the hardest challenge. A chief who can lead in terms of providing the kinds of training, emphasis, and rewards for people with those skills would be very valuable. In particular, we talked about the homeless community and members of the undocumented community here in San Diego as well.
Okay, cool. So our group had a lot of great conversations, very detailed, a lot of them. We got exactly what you guys all put about the homelessness and stuff like that, but some issues that we didn't, that you guys didn't address were making sure that there were greater resources for the mental health resources. We also have more PERT team and staff. And also making multicultural training and cultural sensitivity inclusive of underserved communities. We also got a little bit, we went into detail about going in and implementing the SDSU reports recommendations. So it's pretty much, we went through all the different ones. Yeah.
What does PERT stand for?
PERT team. If you want to explain that. So,
Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. So it's the mental illness response team.
that's pretty much, we got everything. Does anyone else have a question?
All right, very good. Bravo. Thank you for answering question number 1. We're going to shift to question number 2. So the question is, what are the top qualities and characteristics that our next police chief must have? Same process, make your own thoughts, jot them down, share with the group, and then we'll ask you to do the same kind of report out. These are the qualities that that person must possess. All right, I think if we could call attention to this part of the room again, we're going to do the same process and ask what table would like to go first, and we'll hear what your top qualities and traits are that the next police chief must possess. So which table would like to go first? Yeah, good. Come on up.
Thank you. We had a lot, so we broke it down into 3 categories. Felt first that they should have experience with a large, diverse community, a large, diverse staff, with budget issues, including underfunding, with restorative justice, experience with white-collar crime, and with implementing new technology. So that's the experience. We felt that the new commissioner should have a commitment to restorative justice, to empowered citizens review boards and citizens oversight committees, and just a commitment to the citizenry as a whole, that they should be accountable to the community and have a commitment to, and a proven commitment to ethics and integrity for their position as well as for the entire police force. In addition to that, we felt that they should have excellent communication skills, technological as well as verbal and written, with community and with their own staff. Okay?
Nicely done. All right. Another group, ready to go? You look ready.
It's okay. It's just awkward. Graceful is not the word that comes to mind. Thank you. Okay, we actually broke down to about 5 points, somewhat more generally. First is a familiarity with all aspects of the department operations, personally experienced, not just vaguely familiar. For example, somebody who's completed an FBI management course, there are a number of things that were brought up of this sort that actually enable the individual to deal with the multiplicity of aspects that are the burden of a police chief. Number one, next one is, this is a character bit. The ability to earn the respect of all members of the community, and particularly the police department. Their sense of fair play has to be obvious to everyone. They'll never make everyone happy. People will always complain. However, when the bottom line comes up, well, it was fair. And that needs to be widely. Again, excellent communication skills. We didn't break that down specifics. The other is the ability to work constructively with all law enforcement groups. For example, city, county, state, various other groups, including federal, because we have a lot of problems, of course, right now there. And the other is somewhat related, but we believe that the individual needs to be the product of a transparent search process. Even though everyone will never be happy, everyone needs to believe that they were heard and that their views were at least mentioned, hopefully taken into account, and that's the process that some of us are concerned about as it's currently going on.
Okay. For question number 2, we looked at proven skills of integrity, effective communications and listening, politically savvy, and the ability to relate to all communities. So that's, I think, probably wrapped up in some of the things that you brought up as well. And then we called out commitments to social justice, commitments to transparency, and commitments to de-escalation of police-initiated violence, right? And third, we've all heard about things that were going to happen, and 6 months later we wondered what happened to what was going to happen. And that is that not only that the chief have a long-term view, but has follow-up on the commitments that are made, you know, during the year and from year to year.
Very clear.
Generally, these have already been mentioned. Team-oriented. This is for their own staff to have access to this chief, to be responsive to these folks, to be cooperative with other agencies to this, because the solutions are not just within the force. Influential. With this vision, be able to influence others outside the department. And to be flexible. There are ways of doing things, there are laws, and be reactive in a way that is flexible to what is going on now and what is appropriate right now. Visionary. Like to see this chief come in with a plan. What is going to be happening in San Diego and in the communities? Be clear and upfront about that. And responsive to what's coming up. Part of that is what's going on around the country. The proven experience will include under learning, be able to respond locally to what is happening across the nation. New things are coming up, update the vision, incorporate new ideas. Proven experience, yes, also coming from a large city, be able to work with a large number of staff. To be respected. This person should be a known, effective leader in their field. Learns, and definitely needs to know about the law. Thank you.
Nicely done. I'm impressed with the conversations at your table, what you captured on your chart, and that you've done it so efficiently that we have time for question number 3. So the question number 3 is there anything else? Think about the things that you've already written. What else would you want to bring to the attention of the City of San Diego during this selection process for our next chief? We'll do the same thing, make those notes. And again, I would remind you, we would like to collect those input sheets, so your answers written down there are really helpful to us. Input sheet first, conversation, then we'll report out, same kind of thing. That third question, anything else? Is there a table who has not gone first? There's bound to be. That one hadn't gone first. You ready to go? All right, very good. We'll take the chart and you can make it up to the chart stand here. Take your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first and foremost, we think that the search and selection committee and process should include input from local police department leaders, including the former police chiefs that are still in the area, former Chief Sanders, former Chief and Mayor Sanders, Chief Bejarano, and even Chief Zimmerman herself. They've had the experience, and their input is extremely valuable. Also from the City Council, and advice from chiefs in other communities, and the police department leaders, the captains, commanders, the current senior leadership of the department should be consulted, and their input should be considered. We have to have a constructive body camera policy, and it should be made very, very open and public and transparent, like everything else about most other things about the operation of the department. And the chief, with interest in bringing implicit bias training as a tool. There are some new developments in this area of training on implicit bias. It should be implemented, the chief should implement it into the department so that the entire department is aware of what their implicit biases are. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you. And next, you ready? Okay.
So we think it's more the committee that's doing the selection process needs to ask the chief, the candidates they're interviewing, to present a clear vision of what, and with details, of what they're planning on doing for the next 1 or 2 years when they come into the city and get the whole ball rolling. And then that has to be transparent so that at the end, we, the community, can also evaluate it as well. The selection process itself needs to be transparent. It needs to have input from many different communities. You mentioned a few that I didn't even think about, such as the former chiefs, but that's a good point. And this reports of a secret panel, an anonymous panel where we don't know who's actually doing it, we think that's a very bad idea, and we do not want to see that happen. There needs to be open accountability to the public.
Describe what you mean by that phrase.
Help me.
So we felt that, so we were thinking that after the police chief has been in their new position, that there needs to be some review periods where they come back. We can compare what they said they were going to do to what they have done. The things that we were hoping that they would do, we could hold them accountable. So a periodic review time with the communities.
Periodic review.
Yes.
Thank you.
Public periodic review. There you go. And we'd like to see some ongoing technology adoption. The body cameras are one of those. Also, more technology in the way that they train our officers. And the police chief would be the person kind of leading that charge to do that. And finally, for technology, again, for communicating back to the community. Things like a message board that can go out. I wouldn't go so far as to say like an Amber Alert, but maybe messages that can go out. There's an application called Nextdoor for your phone. We do get occasional messages from our police officers, our community officers here. Make that more widespread. Get the messages back out to the community so they know that they're being heard.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, Lydia.
As was with the other tables, we spent a fair amount of time talking about the role of the consultant, the search consultant, and the committee that's going to decide on the candidates. And we understood the need to maybe hire professional consultancy to go round up candidates, right? But it's our anticipation, maybe someone can clarify that these people would not be involved in making the decision, that the decision would be made by the panel or the committee, and the names of those people making the decisions have to be known. We want to know who it is. We don't feel that there's any value to shrouding it in secrecy and casting doubt on the decision-making process. So we spent a fair amount of time and energy. Did I get that right, guys? Okay. Like I believe you said, to incorporate members of the communities being served, as is happening now, but as we get further along in the process, we hope that committee that is formed. The reason to publicize this is to get some idea of the demographics of the decision makers. It's very nice. We are all here and we get to write things down on paper, but eventually it's going to go down to 3, 5, 10. I don't know how many people, but it would be important for us to see what is the profile of the people actually making the decisions. Don't overlook qualified internal candidates, right? We're not opposed to going outside, but let's just not assume that there's some bias for some reason not to consider the good people we already have in the department. And then it's kind of an umbrella thing. We said, gee, aren't the things we're talking about kind of included in Obama's task force on 21st century policing? So we'd like to have some comment from the candidate as to his views on that document. Pardon?
His or her?
His or her. Geez, I blew it. I made it all the way to... That's called implicit bias. And so I want, that's something you shouldn't do. You know, you've got to look anyway. But for that person to explain to us their commitment and how they agree, or if they disagree, why. But we think that's a good starting point, benchmark to get some idea of what this person brings to the job.
Good. Thank you. All right, come on down.
We've been having a hard time picking 3 all night, so you get 4. So our group also talked about the need for a transparent process and for the committee that's reviewing the candidates to be public, both so that we know who's making those decisions and also so that we know that it is indeed a nationwide search and that we're looking at candidates both here and all over the country. Second, we, much like we talked about wanting public input during this part of the process, once the chief is hired, we think that they should seek out input from communities throughout San Diego, particularly communities that are underserved or under-resourced, and do like a town hall tour once they're hired in both traditional and non-traditional settings. So not just the town councils or the community planning groups, but reaching out into other more non-traditional areas. And especially when new technologies or new practices are being considered or implemented so that the community can give input on new technology or new policies. Third, the public, there should just be a greater commitment to making sure the public knows what the job description of a police chief is so that when we're giving input or holding them accountable to something, we know what exactly they should be accountable to. And then, where am I? And then a greater commitment or greater interest in looking at white collar and financial crimes and making sure that those are being investigated as well.
Nicely done. All right. May I ask you to give yourself one more hand for all the work? Yay! Good. I know you have a lot of competing priorities, and that you made the time and commitment to come here and stay here and provide this input is greatly appreciated. I want to give you a couple other next ways. If you feel like you would like to continue providing input, the city's website, Scott mentioned that earlier, it's sandiego.gov/nextchief, and you can both find other forums, you can find access to an online survey. The survey asks similar but different questions. That survey is attached to a Google form, so it can be translated into lots and lots of languages, so please feel free to pass that information on to people who might have been uncomfortable to participate today. So more forums, survey, your input forms turned in tonight. I think those are the ways to continue providing your input. The last thing that I would like to say is that Scott mentioned it earlier, but the information that you see here will be compiled with all of the other city forums. One of the things that City TV has been doing is capturing on tape all of the forums so that the recruiter who's coming to help craft the qualification statement and the announcement that goes out nationally will have the benefit of hearing your voice, not just our synthesized data, but to watch and listen to the community input forums. So we're trying to both honor the time and the voice that you've had and make sure that the right people are seeing it and digesting it as they move through the process. So yeah.
Will we be able to see the synthesis of all of these?
Yes. 2 ways. One, City TV will do on YouTube the videos, and the report that is the synthesis of the community input will be made available, and that's sandiego.gov/nextchief. So I want to turn the microphone back over to our Chief Operating Officer, Scott Chadwick, as he closes for tonight, says thank you, and moves us to adjourn. So, quick question.
I just wondered, can you explain a little bit about what that is?
He will.
So I can probably hear, everyone can hear me, right?
No.
Oh. Okay, so the role of the recruiter, The city of San Diego, the last time that we actually hired or did a recruitment process for a police chief was in 2003 when we selected Chief Lansdowne. So when Mayor Faulkner ended up taking office in, I believe, 2014, his first act was an immediate appointment of Shelley Zimmerman, who's been, I think, an incredible police chief for the city. Her time and drop is now almost done, and so she'll be retiring in March. So what we wanted is, because it's not, I typically don't recruit police chiefs, and because the police chief is critically important to the organization, not just the organization, but the community, we want to make sure that we get someone in place that has an experience of doing this, not just doing a recruitment every 2 or 3 years, but their job has been recruiting, filling key executive positions, specifically police chiefs. So we did a competitive process. It was, the internal term is an RFP process. So we did that. It closed. We've awarded. Now there's a 10-day appeal process that if in the event that someone wants to challenge one of the other vendors, they want to challenge it, they have an ability to do so. At the conclusion of that, then we'll make the announcement. As soon as we get that recruiter on board, we're going to be sharing all the information with the recruiter, and we're going to ask them, how should we be conducting this recruitment process? Who should be on the recruit or the selection panel? We want to really get their information, their knowledge, their experience, so that the community can benefit from it. So that's the purpose of the recruiter. Then what they'll do, they'll take the information, we'll put together a job description. That job description will be vetted throughout the organization. Then what we will do is they will go forth and will initiate an active recruitment. And when I say active, the recruiter is going to actually reach out to individuals throughout the U.S. that potentially meet the city's qualifications, what we're looking for. And then we'll end up hopefully having a very ripe pool that we can start looking at. And just please understand, and that's one of the things that has been asked, are we only focused outside the city of San Diego? And no, for the end of the day, we very well could land on a city of San Diego employee, someone who's in the police department. We don't know. We're encouraging them to apply, just like we're going to encourage anyone who meets the qualifications. Again, this process will be successful if we get the best candidate to lead America's finest police force.
Who the chief is.
The final decision rests with the mayor. So it's a strong mayor form of government. It was passed by the voters. Initially, it was a temporary run, and that occurred. It was a 5-year temporary run that went into effect in 2005. 2010, it was made permanent overwhelmingly by the voters. So that said, the mayor, under Charter Section 57, which is the city of San Diego's Bible, really, that gives the mayor the authority. However, it doesn't stop with that, because the mayor selects, but the next and final step is council confirmation. So there are only 4 positions within the city of San Diego that have that requirement. There's the COO, my position, the fire chief, the police chief, and our CFO. So the final step rests with council. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I guess I'm a little confused. I don't know about how the selection committee works. I've just heard about that. Is this, have these folks already been nominated to the panel? Do we know who they are?
They have not.
When will we find out who they are?
So that we plan on talking to the recruiter. So again, we want to take, our process at this point is we're trying to follow industry best practices. Remember that it is a personnel process. So just like in any situation, you want to protect the integrity of the process. So
I think we will thank you and draw this process to a close. We really appreciate the time that you've devoted here. We want your input in box on the way out. And please take the survey, invite people to future forums, stand around and talk with people for a few minutes, but we are adjourned. Thank you.